Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Family Capacity Building Workshop Supporting Your Child with FASD. My name is Meagan, and I am an FASD Service Coordinator at Surrey Place in Toronto, and I will be your host for today. We appreciate that you are here, and I hope that you're all staying safe and healthy at home. We have over 100 attendees from across Toronto region joining today, and we are very excited to have you. I am presenting today from Toronto, and I'd like to do a land acknowledgement for the region. Surrey Place is committed to reconciliation with Indigenous people and in the spirit of greater inclusion and continued allyship and respect and care for the first people of this land. We begin by offering the territorial land acknowledgement. Surrey Place acknowledges that Toronto is located on the traditional territory of many diverse nations. Toronto was originally home to the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit and Chippewa bands. We also acknowledge that Toronto is home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit today. This event is hosted by the Coordinated Service Planning Provincial Network. The network comprises a consortium of 28 coordinated service planning lead agencies from across 34 regions in Ontario. As sponsors for the workshop with funding from the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, the network comes with extensive knowledge of FASD in terms of research, the provision of clinical and family support services, and the delivery of the FASD worker program. So let's start with some general housekeeping for today. This presentation is approximately 2.5 hours, and we will have a 5-minute intermission. At 2 different points in the workshop, you will be asked to join a virtual breakout session to participate in any activity and discussion. You will be given instructions on how to do this during those times. Throughout the workshop, the presenters will provide an opportunity to ask questions. If you have a question, we ask that you type it into the chat box. We may not have time to get to every question, and if that's the case, you can send it to an email address that we will share in the chat. This event is being recorded, so please turn off your camera if you do not wish to be seen on the recording. Please mute your microphone while the presentation is in progress, and use the chat for questions and comments or any technical difficulties. We are here to help. Please reach out if you have any questions during the event. Eric Marier, who is a service coordinator at Surrey Place in Toronto, will be presenting today. Helping us during our breakout activities are myself and Anne Lindsay, who is the service coordinator for the adult program and adult FASD clinic at Surrey Place.
Thank you, Meagan. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see my screen. Can I get a thumbs up to if everyone can see my my introduction screen? Okay, thank you. So my name is Eric Marier, and welcome today to our workshop supporting your child with FASD, a workshop for families. Again, just want to reiterate that we are recording today's presentation. So please, if you do not want your face to show or your home to show on the recording, which may be posted at a future date, please turn off your camera now. And we also ask that you turn off your microphones during the presentation. We will have a chance for a question and answer period, throughout the workshop. And again, like Meagan said, you can put those questions into the chat. We will be doing a breakout activity twice during this presentation. And during those times, we'll let you know when it's about to occur. You could turn your cameras back on if you want to take part in that smaller group discussion. Okay, so what we hope that you walk away with today is learning to better identify how your child's strengths can accommodate them during challenges. Also, learning to assess when advocacy is required for your child. And last, learning better how to detect when to involve your child in solving challenges. Throughout the presentation today, you'll see these three letters keep popping up, the green S, the yellow A, and the blue P. And that's just when we're talking about strategies and accommodations, we want to call back to these three learning objectives. There's a lot of information in this presentation. We tried to jam as much of our knowledge into a 2.5 hour slide deck, and it was difficult, but our presentation is busting at the seams, so there is a lot of information. Some of the language can be clinical. We tried not to include that clinical language, but sometimes they do slip back onto those slides. So if you have any questions about the terminology, please let us know. Okay, so one thing we really want to say from the top of this presentation, and it's probably the most important idea that we want to bring across to you today, and that is to always stay connected with your child. Remember to enjoy those good times. I know we had a tough year this year with COVID, but a lot of us got to spend a lot of time with our children at home. And so it's good to remark to them when times are good. It's good to label when you have good moments with them as good moments, as enjoyable moments. They need to know that these are times that are to be appreciated, and what is a good moment. What is it when we're having a good time together? To start to label those things so that they get an idea of what that is, right? And it could be a goal as well for them. When we're spending time with our child, these are the moments that we build that foundation of trust and support between ourselves, and to make sure that we take the time to take those short breaks during the day to spend that time with our child, multiple times during the day. It doesn't have to be an hour or a half hour, but just taking time to check in with your child and maybe do something with your child. Become detectives together. Start to look for some of the challenges that might be happening in your family and what might be the causes for some of those challenges. And then work together on how to best support those challenges, and hopefully some of those behaviors might start to decrease. Your relationship with your child is more important than getting the math homework done. We live in a world, especially here in Toronto, where we're very A-type personality and we're very goal-oriented. A lot of these goals are not as important. I would say all of them are not as important as your relationship with your child. That relationship is a foundation on which to build problem solving. So as much as possible today, we really want to bring this idea across to you to problem solve together and to involve your child whenever possible, asking them, asking your team, do they have any ideas that might help with some of the difficulties or challenges that we're facing throughout the day. And then there's that detectives word again. It's going to be a big theme today. Become detectives together. Suss out what might be going on in some situations, and then work together to try and solve those problems. And there's that blue piece. So we're calling back to that learning objective of learning how to better or best detect when to involve your child in strategies and accommodations. Dr. Ross Greene, the author of The Explosive Child, I'm sure a lot of you already know of him. He says that challenging behavior occurs when the expectations being placed on a child or a teen exceeds that child or youth's capacity to adapt, to respond adaptively. So what he's saying there is that a lot of the times when our kids are misbehaving or they're having a tantrum or our teen is yelling at us or maybe being aggressive, it's that the situation that they're currently finding themselves in that moment is a situation that they cannot cope with. It could be that they don't have the skill to meet the expectation in that situation or in that environment, or they're not able to cope maybe with some feelings that they're feeling. Maybe there's some anxiety that's being produced within that situation or environment. So what Dr. Ross Greene is saying is that some children, some teens are lacking the skills to handle certain demands and expectations. And he feels the goal is to help kids and their parents and their caregivers solve these problems, what he calls lagging skills, rather than trying to modify our kids' behavior or control our kids' behavior through the application of rewards and punishments. I had a mom recently who told me that when she brought her daughter to school, her 8-year-old, she was fighting to get into the she was struggling. She didn't want to get into the classroom, and the teacher said, "Well, you guys should be using incentives to make her more incentives to make her come into the classroom." Well, we know with these kiddos, incentives are rewards, or incentives can even be punishments, right? To get them to do something. With a kid with FASD, with a lot of our kiddos, these kinds of strategies do not work, these consequence-based strategies. It's better to support them through what may be happening in that situation. There could be a skill that's lagging that we could help the child with. There could be some support that the child is lacking at that time that we could help them with. We'll talk more about the consequence-based behaviors that traditional parenting tends to present to us and how that doesn't necessarily work with someone with FASD. We often speak up when our kids are doing something wrong and our heart is in the right place, and it's an attempt to correct them. But there are many things that our children do well and we don't take enough time to tell them. No one tells them sometimes when they're doing great things. So another idea that we want to bring across today is to start putting more of your energy and more of your focus on their strengths. Placing all our attention all the time on what our child or teen does wrong limits their potential and it negates their strengths. It's an attempt to correct, so our heart is in the right place. We want to help them when we tell them not to do something, but it doesn't tell your child what to do, and it really builds on nothing. There's no teaching in those moments. Instead, we ask parents to be strengths focused and to celebrate your child's successes. It'll make it easier for them to recognize something as a success later on, right? To start labeling those things as a success, to start labeling those things as a strength. They may not know that these great things that they're doing is actually a strength. They might think they're just always lacking. They might think that everything they do is challenged or is not good enough. But there are things that they do that are more than good enough, and no one tells them. No one labels that as something that's a strength. So we need to start doing that when we see those strengths. Focusing on your child's strengths when talking to them will also help them when they're talking to teachers, when they're talking to employers about what their own strengths are, what they can bring to the table, what they're able to contribute maybe within a work environment. We had a young lady at Surrey Place who worked in a shop where many movie studios in Toronto were using this shop, and it's a very complex environment. And her boss was concerned that she wasn't meeting certain expectations and responsibilities of where they had placed her within that shop. So they had a meeting, and this young lady was able to tell them what her strengths are, because these had already been labeled. These were already things that she had recognized to herself were strengths, and she let her boss know what these strengths were. And they were able to then play to those strengths and reposition her within that shop that added to the shop, that contributed to the shop. It also builds self-confidence, right? When you know your strengths, and you're more likely when you have self-confidence to tell people of your strengths. You're also more likely to try new things, to be motivated. With a lot of our teens with FASD, there's been this buildup of things that they can't do, or they've been labeled a problem in certain environments or situations. And that buildup after a while starts to ebb away. It starts to chip away at their self-confidence. And then they start to lack motivation. They get maybe a bit of anxiety about trying something new. Take an interest in their interests. With my own kids, I've watched hours of terrible television, but it was in the interest of taking an interest in their interests, right? To become active in some of the things that they like to do. And remember, interests become strengths. Strengths usually are born from something that someone was interested in, and then it was facilitated or it was done repeatedly, and it became a strength. So an interest can become a strength with your support. And tell teachers, tell EAs, tell coaches of your child's interests, of your child's strengths. They could use that in order to better interact with your child, right? They can play to those strengths. and provide them with for those younger kids, you can provide them with an all about me sheet, which if you Google all about me and FASD, you should be able to download that free resource. It's also listed in a resource list that we created specifically for this workshop today. The link will be provided at the end of our presentation. So your child does great stuff. I sound like a broken record here, but we really want to hammer this point home. Recognize and compliment their successes. Be a strengths detective. Keep a strengths inventory. Maybe you have a journal where you keep all the information on your child's services or the people you've contacted for your child. In that journal, you could start keeping a strengths inventory and keep it updated of things you know are strengths, things you know are interests in your child's life, and then changing it as they move to new stages, like moving to a new school. Maybe your child works very hard and no one recognizes that. We know that a child in a classroom is with FASD, their brain is probably working twice as hard as everyone else around them just to keep up. Even though they're not getting the grades, maybe that their next door, the kid sitting next to them is getting, they're working much harder than that child just to keep up. So we know they're hard workers. Maybe your child learns by doing, and they're very good at watching someone do something or maybe doing it along them, and then they pick up that skill. That's a hands-on learner, and that's a skill, that's a strength. Maybe they won't quit until they're finished something. You've sent your daughter to go shovel the driveway and it's dinner time, and you call her in and she won't come in until she's finished shoveling that driveway. That's a strength. Maybe they're often in the moment and they enjoy, those fun activities to the fullest, and it spills over and it's contagious and it makes you start to enjoy those activities to the fullest. That's a strength. Maybe they're a captivating public speaker or a funny storyteller, and everybody thinks in the family, oh, they're just a show off, they're just a showboat. But speaking in front of people, engaging them in a story, that's a strength. Not a lot of people can do that. Maybe they're a strong visual learner. Just by seeing things, they're able to pick up certain skills. They're able to pick up certain bits of information. That's a strong visual learner. Maybe they're creative, right? In a group, on a group project, they've got that creative spark to get the project going. They might need some support with those other steps, but not a lot of people can get that idea, that first idea that gets everything going across, right? And maybe your child has that as a strength. Maybe they easily make new friends. You have a 2-year-old daughter who walks into a park. Within 30 seconds, she's holding the hand of another 2-year-old girl. No words were exchanged. We don't know how it happened, but they've got great social skills. They've got skills where they can initiate friendships very easily. Or maybe they're amazing with computers. We downplay that in this generation because we always think, oh, the younger generation, they know what they're doing. They're just born with these skills, but they're not. They've got to learn these skills through repetition, through hands-on learning to become really good with computers. And then we're always asking our teens, we're always asking our young kids how to turn a machine on or how to use a particular app. Those are all great strengths, and they can all spill over into other strengths. And we know interests become strengths with your support. Knowing your child's strengths will help you know what to change in the environment to build on these strengths, to build on these interests. So keeping that strengths inventory is very important for that. And it helps you become an effective advocate. So when you're sharing information with other adults in the child's life, when you're advocating for them, letting people know what they're really good at, what they're interested in, they can arrange their own environments to successfully interact with your child. And it helps you with strategies and accommodations to challenges. Can some of their strengths be used in accommodations to certain challenges? Focusing on their strengths also can take away all that attention we place on their challenges. Like if they're having trouble at school, or if they're having trouble with the law, those areas, those problematic areas with kids with FASD, they tend to get bigger and bigger until it becomes their life. That's how they view life, they're a problem in all these different situations. And there isn't other areas of their life that a spotlight's being shown on. So those areas become smaller and smaller. When we start to focus on some of their interests, some of the things they like to do, some of their strengths, those areas can then become bigger, right? So they may still have that other area of their life where, they're having difficulty and those things still need to be addressed, But there's now another area of their life that's getting bigger. So this area, the problematic area, isn't just their life anymore. There's a whole other layers to their lives. There's a whole other a bunch of areas of their life that they're also experiencing, that they're also experiencing life through. And as a result, they may start to place more interest in positive things, in productive things, maybe developing a skill to get a volunteer job that they're interested in, or a part-time job, and maybe leveraging some of their skills at school, right? In subjects that they're interested in, or maybe even in subjects that they're having difficulty in, but they want to improve upon. If they like to do a task with you, like doing the groceries, especially our younger kiddos, and we feel this is always slowing me down whenever she wants to do the groceries with me. Well, what we're doing there is we're investing. We're investing in our child when we get them to do things along with us. Do more of these kinds of activities with them. It builds self-confidence, and they'll start to have more and more positive experiences. They too are not enjoying the tantrums. They're not enjoying the fights that they're having with others. They would rather have these positive experiences, and they would rather have them with you. So if they like to be outside or active, involve them in shoveling, involve them in raking. To us, shoveling and raking may not seem like a fun thing to do, but to a 5-year-old or to an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, knowing that they can contribute to the family can be very enticing to them. If they like to be helpful, have them take out the garbage. If they like computers or phones, have them find out some information for you, maybe like the weather or the next Netflix show maybe has a release date that you're interested in. And also for our teens, if they like to use tech on their phones, introduce them to those apps that have maybe reminders or have calendar functions in them to help them remember some of their appointments. And if they like phones, show an interest in the apps they use. And try new things together. Try new things together doesn't mean that you go out and try ice skating for a whole hour. It could be that, no, today we're just going to go try on these skates and we'll go for a few minutes. And if you like it, we can stay. If you want to do something else, then we'll move on, right? So you don't have to plan these huge outings for when you're trying new things. You can start with baby steps and see if this is an interest. It may already be a strength. Okay, so is there any questions? Anne, is there any questions that have popped up since we've started?
Not right now.
No? Okay, well, we're just getting started. So everyone learns differently, and with FASD, your child may also learn differently. FASD can affect certain areas of the brain. CAN-FASD describes fetal alcohol spectrum disorder as a lifelong disability that affects the brain and body of people who were exposed to alcohol in the womb. Each person with FASD has both strengths and challenges and will need special supports to help them succeed with many different parts of their lives. So there are 10 brain domains that can potentially be impacted by alcohol exposure during pregnancy. When we talk about brain domains, we're really talking about different areas of the brain. And your child may be affected by differences in some of these brain domains, and this may be affecting your child's daily living. It's important to remember when we look at this is pretty overwhelming seeing all these 10 brain domains presented at once, but it's important to remember that not everyone with FASD will have the same brain functions affected. When we diagnose in a diagnostic clinic for FASD, what we're looking at is these 10 brain domains, and we're testing these brain domains. Having 3 or more of these brain domains significantly impacted, along with confirmation of prenatal alcohol exposure, gets you a diagnosis of FASD. So this is how they diagnose for FASD in Canada based on the Canadian Diagnostic Guidelines. So I want to tell you a bit more about these brain domains today, give you a bit of knowledge around what they are and how they can be affecting your child's life. Because it's overwhelming to look at them all 10 at once, what we've done today is we've taken all 10 brain domains and we've organized them in a way that we feel is meaningful to families. So we'll go through those 10 brain domains now and how they may be affecting your child's life. The 4 categories that we broke them down into is control, thinking, daily life, and physical. So our first category under control, behavioral and emotional, the first brain domain is attention. So your child with FASD may have difficulty sitting still, paying attention. They might be easily distracted. We also have affect regulation, and that's controlling and adjusting your emotions. Your child with FASD or your teen with FASD may have difficulty with that. And that can also include diagnoses of anxiety, depression, and mood imbalance. And then executive functioning, which is a big one. Executive functioning is using the resources around you to best navigate your day-to-day. And someone with FASD may have difficulty with planning, with sequencing, problem solving, organizing. They might be impulsive or hyperactive. They may have difficulty understanding cause and effect. And that's really important. I'm going to call back to when we talked about consequences and that teacher telling that mom, we should have an incentive here to bring your child back into the classroom. So cause and effect, if you have difficulty with that, those kinds of consequence-based strategies are not very effective. What cause and effect is, and I'm sure most of you know, but I'll explain it maybe a little bit differently than how you've seen it in the past. So if you're speeding down the road or a particular road and you get a ticket, the cause was you speeding and the effect was getting a ticket. That was the consequence. Now, the likelihood of you speeding down that same road again in the future has now decreased because you got the ticket. So you learn in that situation through cause and effect. Some with FASD may not learn through cause and effect that intuitively. It may not come as naturally to us than it does to them. So for them to start controlling their own behaviors based on what can happen in the future is not always happening the same way as it happens with us. So you could see anything consequence-based, anything where you're hearing a teacher say, we should be using incentives here, is not effective for someone with FASD. For some of our kids with FASD, not all. That's if they have difficulty with that understanding of cause and effect. They may also, if they have deficits in executive functioning, they may also have difficulty with abstract concepts. Abstract is anything that's not right in front of us. It's anything that we can't touch. So things like time, money, finances, and the future, right? Seeing ahead is very abstract. Knowing what something will feel like in the future is something we do all the time. We might do something really hard like workout and we're hurting because we know in an hour or half an hour we'll feel really good about what we just did and our body will feel great and we'll feel all pumped up. But that's abstract thinking. We're kind of seeing and making ourselves feel what that will be like in the future. So our decision making in the present is very affected by that. Someone with FASD who has difficulty with executive functioning is not planning ahead in the future the way you and I sometimes do. So they're not able to make themselves feel what something will feel like in the future. So sometimes what their decisions that they're doing in the present might seem very impulsive because they're not making that decision necessarily based on how it's going to affect them or everyone around them in the future. Some with executive functioning difficulties may have also challenges with transitions, with change, and also may have difficulty managing time, how long something takes, right? So you might say, we're going to the grocery store at 9 a.m. You should have your jacket on and meet me downstairs for that. And for them, 9 a.m. means that's when I brush my teeth, that's when I shower, that's when I put my jacket on. So knowing how long something will take, that could be very abstract. Next category is thinking, and under that we have cognition, that's thinking and reasoning. Again, problem solving, understanding complex ideas. Memory, that's a big one in FASD. Some kids and teens or adults may have difficulty with long-term or short-term memory. or accessing information when they need it. And also, because of memory impairment, they may sometimes, especially our kiddos, may be accused of lying. What we call, what's really happening is confabulation, where blanks in a memory are being filled in automatically by your brain by other ideas, by maybe scenes from a TV show, stories that other people have told you, and you fill in those blanks so that your brain can make sense of the event, and then you're able to tell the event. That happens to everyone. That's why everyone who tells you about a past event has a different version of it, because they're seeing it through their own lenses, but also because the brain is filling in those little blanks with different memories that that person has, or different thoughts, or different ideas. For some with a memory impairment, like a child with FASD, you could see confabulation happening a lot. We'll talk more about that later on today. And then some with FASD may have trouble with language. When we test for language in a diagnostic clinic, we're testing for expressive language, so the words that they're using to express themselves, and also receptive language, when they understand words that other people are using. There can also be language delays for some with FASD, also processing delays, so processing information coming through the ear and then going to the translation part or the language part of the brain to be translated into meaning for that person. There's some travel time. When you hear something, it goes to the brain and there's some stuff happening, and then you understand what that other person said. To us, that feels instantaneous. To some with FASD, there may be a delay in that. Next is daily life. Under daily life, we put academic achievement, and that's really a culmination of everything, the other brain domains we talked about. Someone with FASD, because of some of the challenges in those areas, they may have difficulty with reading, math, again, abstract concepts. And then we have adaptive behavior, social skills, and social communication. Basically social communication. So some with FASD may not understand personal boundaries or social cues. They might be dismature, not as mature as kids their own age or adults their own age. So they can be very vulnerable socially and easily taken advantage of. And they may have difficulty taking another person's perspective, seeing things from another person's perspective. And then as they get older, they may not see the importance of hygiene. They may have difficulty with hygiene, or cope with certain difficult situations, or managing their money. Under physical, we have neuroanatomy and neurophysiology. That's really the brain structure, brain function. Someone with FASD might have a smaller head, a different brain size. They may have a seizure disorder. And then we have motor skills. So someone with FASD may have difficulty with gross motor skills, like sitting, standing, walking, or fine motor skills, anything we use our fingers for, like printing, using scissors, buttons on a shirt. Outside of the 10 brain domains, families also tell us that they see sensory issues. So we process information through senses. The big five are sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste, but we also process through our body's balance, movement, what our internal organs feel. And this processed information helps us to either respond or to ignore sensory input, things coming at us during the day. We can kind of suss out intuitively what's important. All that information coming at us, we tune into what is the most important piece of information coming at us in that moment. Someone with FASD may have difficulty processing this kind of information. They might feel flooded with sensory input and they're not able to really focus on maybe what's the most important thing in the environment, or they may actively seek more input if they're undersensitive to certain sensory input, what we call hyposensitive. So your child may have difficulty responding effectively to different types of sensory input, or too much sensory input coming at them at once. And they might be good at managing the input one day and not so good the next. And how that becomes problematic too is they may be unable to appropriately communicate this difficulty. And this might look like a bad behavior to us. So again, you have to be detective here And kids aren't always able to express their needs, their sensory needs, so we figure it out through what they're doing. And sometimes we have a guess as to what's going on, and we see if some kind of support might work. An occupational therapist can help you in this area. Any questions, Anne?
Hey, Eric, no questions right now.
Okay, nice. Well, hopefully that was clear. So we sort of touched on the surface of all these 10 brain domains. We really want you to start thinking about some of this information. So what we're going to do is I'll give our web producer the cue of when she's going to put us into smaller groups. It's not going to happen right now, just in a few minutes. First, I'll introduce the activity that we'll do in our breakout session. So we're going to go into a breakout session. You'll be with a smaller group for around 10 minutes, and you'll look at a scenario. I'll introduce it on the next slide of a little girl named Amy. She is 8 years old. What we're going to do is we're going to be detectives, and we're going to try and figure out where certain challenges might come from. So often the brain domains that I talked about are oversimplified in how they're presented, and we know that they overlap a lot when we look at symptoms and functioning. So when you're looking at Amy and you're trying to suss out what some of the challenges where they might be connected to some of the brain domains where she's having issues, we know that it might be more than one brain domain for maybe one challenge. Also, not all challenges fall under these 10 domains or sensory. Some of them are challenges just based on life and life events. So with your breakout group, you'll be discussing, is this challenge something that's happening with one of the brain domains? Is it sensory, or is it a life event that's currently happening? So let's look at Amy before we go into our breakout session. And this slide will also be available during the breakout session, and also a chart that charts the 10 brain domains to help you as a guide during your discussion in that smaller group. And there'll be a host there from Surrey Place, who is either going to be myself, Meagan, or Anne, and they'll help facilitate the conversation. Okay, so Amy is 8 years old, and when her mom asks her to do something, she says no. When her mom takes her by the hand to make her follow through on an instruction, like brush your teeth, Amy screams and cries and runs to her room and slams the door. At school, she fidgets in her chair and sometimes walks around. Other times, she doodles while the other students are working. Her drawings can be quite good, and she can tell you big, imaginative stories around her drawings. But both her parents are concerned, though, because sometimes she story tells about what happened during the day and makes up events when they ask her about certain past events. After school, she wants to use the computer to watch YouTube videos of people making crafts and drawings. She can be quite messy when making her crafts. She screams when her parents don't let her. Amy enjoys going outdoors with her family, such as hiking, camping, and other physical activities. But she'll cry and scream if her parents say something encouraging or compliment her older brother. Her parents are exhausted as Amy has started to hit and yell at her brother whenever he interacts with mom and dad. Okay, so that is our scenario, and it'll be in the breakout room on the screen for you, along with this chart of the 10 brain domains. So how can we help? So now we'll talk about different examples for accommodations, for strategies. And what we'll do is we'll use some of the brain domains, some of those 10 brain domains, not all, but a few from before as launching points to talk about accommodations, to talk about strategies. So the first brain domain that we'll talk about is language. Someone with FASD may have difficulty with complex, abstract, and symbolic language, like metaphors, like sarcasm. They may also not understand what someone is asking of them. So perhaps they didn't understand the words, or they only picked up a few words. There's a bit of a tension here happening as well, right? But you could see now how the brain domains start to overlap. So now we're having attention and language. Or it took a while to process what the words mean. we're so used to saying something and then someone just jumps to. We order from Amazon, it shows up the next day. We tell someone to do something, we expect them to do it right away. Well, with someone with FASD, they may need to process what you've asked them before they could jump to, right? Before they can meet your expectation. They may also fail to follow through on something that they agreed to do. They may have misunderstood the instruction, they didn't understand the instruction, or these are smart kiddos. They may be covering for not understanding and just doing anything because they didn't want to appear stupid, right? They have these great social skills sometimes and they know, I don't want to appear quote unquote stupid in front of all these people. Or, and then memory creeps in here, they may, because of a memory impairment, they may have forgotten the instruction. And that happens a lot. So one of the things that we recommend, especially with our younger kiddos, and it seems obvious, but we don't always do it, and that's to say your child's name first and make eye contact before you give them an important piece of information, like an instruction. So if your child's in the other room and you want them to take the garbage out, go in the room with them and give them the instruction. Because they may not understand you from the other room, or, I mean, they may not hear you, or there might be competing things competing for their attention, right? All this sensory information coming at them during the day. So you want to make it very salient, very clear to them that you're talking to them and you're making eye contact. The words coming out of your mouth are directed to them. They're for them. This also works in a classroom. If a teacher feels that the child doesn't always follow through on instructions very well, make it very clear. Give that extra layer of support. It may not always work, but giving that extra layer of support of making eye contact with that child, letting them know that the instruction you're giving to the whole group also includes them, and making that maybe even saying their name first. Say what you mean, right? So leave no guesswork, no hints. Use concrete, simple language that you know they understand. Words that you've heard them use before, especially when you're giving them an important piece of information like an instruction. And state exactly what to do. So we don't want to mince words here. We want to be very, very precise in what we're telling them because we know that, the information coming at them during a moment or during a situation, there's a lot of competition for that information to sort of be processed by them. We want to make sure that when we give them information that we're being very clear and very concise. Instead of focusing on what you don't want them to do, like saying something like don't run, focus on what you do want them to do. So you'd replace don't run with walk. And avoid abstract, broad instructions, especially with our younger kiddos. So replace things like go clean your room with pick up 3 books and put them on the shelf. And they may need, because we know these kiddos are visual learners and a lot of them are hands-on learners, which are great strengths, they may need to be shown what to do as they're being told what to do. So how to line up, you might start to line up books on a shelf if you want them to line books up on a shelf. Now they know what that looks like, right? Now they know it's not a pile that you just jam into the shelf, right? That you actually line them up nicely. You may have to calmly clean up their room with them as you tell them to clean up their room. And this could be a process that you do over years. As they get older, you ask them to clean their room and then you start to do it with them. So that gives that extra layer of support that now they know what they should be doing, but also you're showing them exactly how to do it. And they're getting sort of that hands-on training from you. And then over the years, they may need less and less reminders. They may need less and less help. So you slowly fade yourself away. So that green S is popping up there because what we're doing here is we're using their strength, especially if they're a hands-on learner, and we're playing to that strength, right? If they're a hands-on learner, when we teach them something, we're going to be doing it with them. It's kind of like Amy with the brushing of teeth. Maybe she didn't know what brushing teeth meant. I mean, we may have told her 100 times, but there may have been some other support we didn't know about that she knew then what brushing teeth was. But it could be that we brush our own teeth along with her. We show her, how to cover every tooth and rinse and all those steps. Stating exactly what to do also concerns questions, right? When we're asking questions, when we're asking for bits of information. So when you're asking them a question, be very specific about what information you're seeking. So instead of asking things like, how was your day today? Ask them very specifically what you want to know about that day. And then again, because it's a past event, you may need to give them a bit of support around that. Break everything down to simple pieces when you're giving instructions, when you're giving information, especially if you know your child has difficulty with understanding language at times. So one-step instructions given one at a time is the best way to go. So you give the instruction, they do the instruction, and then you can give the next instruction. And visuals help, right? We know that some of our kiddos, their strength is that they're strong visual learners. So again, show them how to do it. Model the task for them. A big aspect under language is to provide information in a visual format. So you may want to have instructions on a visual schedule, right, with the steps, and every picture is a step. And then when you give them the instruction the first time, you can go through the steps with them, and then you could leave that visual with them, and the next time you ask them that instruction, they could sort of refer back to that visual. There's some great websites. We've listed them in the resource list for visuals, for visual engines, where you can create some of those strips, those instruction strips. I'll show you an example in a few minutes. When we're talking to them, we know, like I said before, that auditory processing that's happening when you hear a word and the brain has to do a bit of work before it gets translated into meaning for the person. There's some travel time there that's instantaneous for us. We hear someone say something, we know it automatically. We understand it very quickly. For someone with FASD, there may be a processing delay happening there. So we need to give them as much time as possible to process information, to process words when we talk to them. Okay, the next brain domain that we'll talk about is memory. So they may have difficulty remembering information with retrieval and retention. They may have difficulty making use of information, especially when they need it in the moment. And this is something we see often. There may be inconsistent learning. So they might know how to do something one day and then forget the next day. So they might know how to load a dishwasher on Tuesday, and then Wednesday night when we ask them, they just are frozen there and on the spot because they don't remember what to do first. Or they may know how to do addition in math one day, and then the next day they need lots of help with it. So how do we help? So this seems obvious. Use reminders. Be very generous with providing reminders. Give reminders in a positive, supportive tone. So it doesn't sound like, I've told you a million times, this is how we do it. That's not supportive. That will make them feel like they're the problem, right? That there's something wrong. It's better to be very generous and to give those reminders in a very positive, supportive tone, in a way that they won't feel that they can't ask you after for that reminder. So we want to make sure that they feel comfortable asking for help when they need it. And then ask them, those visual reminders that I told you about, those strips, ask them, where would this help? Where would this visual reminder help you? So something like a morning routine for a kiddo. If you create something like that so that they know every step, they can refer back to when you say, get ready, we're about to go out. They know which steps, right? They can refer back to that. And then you can ask them, where would this reminder help you? Where could we place this that would help you best? And then it could be, something specific, like getting dressed, all the steps. Or you could put, maybe they want this on their dresser or in their closet. There's lots of websites that you can create these for free. Connectability.ca is one of those, and we've listed them in our resource list. Ask them if they need help, especially if you feel they're confused. Don't wait for them to ask you for help. Be very proactive, because we want to show them that asking for help is okay. They may not ask for help because, again, they may not want to appear stupid, right? So let's just give them an out and ask them. We'll be the proactive one. And then let teachers know, let coaches know that they need to offer an ask for help environment to successfully interact with your child. Some teachers, they may have a rule. He might say, I say it once, too bad, so sad. Well, that's not going to work for someone with FASD. We need to let that teacher know that in order for the child to, succeed in their classroom, in order for them to interact better in that environment, they need to know that it is safe to ask for help. And showing your child that asking for help is okay makes them better advocates, so that later on they have that confidence to ask for help. Think of, the people that have no qualms asking for clarification during a meeting or asking for someone to repeat themselves. Chances are that is a person who's probably high up in your organization, but also has lots of confidence. We want our kids to have that kind of confidence so that when we're not around, they know when to ask for help. And use repetition when teaching a skill, especially if they keep forgetting how to do something. We know that repetition is very effective for teaching new skills. You may have to reteach a skill when they're in a different environment. So they may know how to put on their winter coat at home, but not so well at school. So they may need to be retaught that skill at school. So repetition also plays to the strength of someone that is a hands-on learner, someone who learns by doing. And your child likely learns best through repetition. Short-term memory is often impaired in FASD. And we know that repetition strengthens skills in everyone's brain, even those with issues with memory or impulsivity. Science shows, how the neurons work, that the more you do something, the less taxing it is on the brain. Think of when you first learned to tie your shoes, or later in life when you have to drive to a new job. The first times may have seemed quite daunting to you and may have seemed like it took up a lot of time to do. But then after you do it over and over again, like driving to work, to a new job, you might even forget how you got there that day, or you may even for shoe tying you may have forgotten, I don't remember when I tied my shoes, my hands just know what to do now. So that's what happens with repetition, is that we learn skills so well that we're not using as much of our brain power in later times or later in situations where we're doing those skills, right? And so the brain has built those pathways, those neurons have strengthened to the point where we're no longer using our brain that much. The hands just seem to know what to do. The feet just seem to know what to do. So we want to offer that kind of teaching for our kids with FASD. And repetition can be a positive experience for a child when it isn't forced and when it occurs naturally. So when the task is actually needed. So only teaching tying your shoes when they need to be tied, not doing repetition in the same sitting, right? Going over and over and over again how to tie your shoe. You would just teach it once, but you would do it structured. So you would build it into a routine. So repetition works best when it is built into a routine and when it's consistent, when it's built into a regular routine. So it could be every morning before we go to school. And also repetition works when it's supported. So you're actually getting in there with your child and you're helping them through this new skill with as much support as is needed to get this thing done, like tying your shoes. And then over time, you start to fade yourself away. So over the period of many days, over the period of many situations where they've tied their shoe, you're doing less and less over time. With someone with FASD, that process might be a bit longer. And if the task you're teaching is something like shoe tying, then you need to set aside enough time every morning for shoe tying. If this is the hill you're going to die on, shoe tying, and you really want to teach this skill to them, you have to give yourself enough time so that you're not rushed and you're very supportive, right? That this is a positive experience. And you have enough time to actually support them through that task. Any questions?
Yeah, I got one.
Okay, go ahead. I can't hear you very well. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry, my phone is bad on the audio for speaking it too. But the visual learning for the previous page that you had for like toilets and all that household wise, means of labels could be just as supportive also, where you can place those into the same exact areas, or uh, like household how should I say, like okay, I got some labels like fridge, declaring it fridge and stuff, but those labels, what's in the fridge and stuff even, but like personal experience with my daughter, she has a hard time flushing her toilet, for example. So a label meaning flush toilet after use would be something as a visual learning skill for them to read themselves when they're going to the water on their own time. To that repetitive being that's more not where you'd have to be with the child all the time doing so, but the child will notice the visual uh, label that plays for her to be herself, like toilet after use in uh, the bringing of.
I'm not. I'm not hearing you very well. You're breaking up, but I'm just going to just confirm if I've heard right. So you use a visual for the bathroom routine, but you also need to be in the room with her so that she remembers to flush the toilet.
Yeah, instead of having to be in the room though with her, a means of setting up a label for the child, so she that way it remembers her before, just like a visual learning.
I'm still not hearing you very well, and I apologize, but I'm going to try and answer that question with the information that I received. So yeah, you can put a visual there for her to remember flushing toilet. But you may realize after a while, if that doesn't work, you may need to add an extra level of support. And that could be standing outside the bathroom, maybe with the door a bit open, having her maybe point to the pictures after every step. And but she may need that extra level of support of having someone outside the washroom to sort of remind her as she needs to flush the toilet to flush the toilet, right? And through repetition, you can sort of fade that support, but it could take a while. She might need someone there for a while outside the door as that extra support for her to remember to flush the toilet. But yeah, it's what it is. It's just providing as much support as possible for them to be successful in that moment, and then over time through repetition, slowly fading that support away.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'm sorry that we can hear you very well. But yeah, so a lot of people call this habit stacking as well. Is that if a child has a whole bunch of habits in a routine that are really strengthened because of repetition, adding that extra habit, that extra step like um, hand washing, um, we can do it after something that she's already developed as a habit, right? And so the habit that she's already developed, it could be wiping herself, which might be already very well developed, is a cue then for her to flush the toilet. That's where we want to get at. So it's always when she wipes herself, you provide that extra cue, like remember, flush the toilet, and then she's done wiping and she flushes the toilet. So it's you're getting in between those two different well-known, that habit that's very well developed and that habit that isn't well developed, and you're adding that extra support to make sure that the one that's not as well developed is happening. And then slowly you're making your support smaller as this gets built into a strong habit. And then naturally, what will happen is wiping yourself will then be the cue to flush the toilet. Right?
Okay, so we have, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we had an earlier question when we were talking about sensory, and Amina had asked that her daughter does not feel hot water, and so showers can sometimes be scalding hot. And she was wondering if that could be part of her sensory lack of sensory awareness.
Yeah, it sounds like she's oversensitive, right? She's hypersensitive to heat. Uh, I would get a referral to an occupational therapist
Okay, and
for
then
that. Yeah.
yeah.
But also in the meantime to be very aware that she is sensitive to hot water and to sort of I mean, it seems, obvious, but it can be complex. But to sort of choose a temperature that works for her, right? Or maybe baths are better. Like finding another way that sensory, maybe that water coming out from the shower can also be something that she's sensitive to. That a bath might be a bit better. But it's just trying new things and seeing what works for that child. And an occupational therapist may have some other ideas, right, to sort of build on those strategies.
Yeah, and I know that you can purchase faucets where you can set the temperature, and then when she turns on the shower, the temperature is already set and she can't regulate it even to a hotter
Okay.
temperature. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. And then we have a hand up by Colette. I'm not sure if Colette wants to unmute herself and
So,
ask
okay.
a question.
I'm really sorry. I didn't realize my hand was up.
Okay, that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Okay, so let's move on to lying. When we know it's not really lying, right? So with FASD, confabulation can occur due to a memory impairment. So due to problems with memory, your child may be confused about what really happened. And so they may either retell events in an incorrect order. They may also make things up sometimes to cover, because some of our kiddos are very, very socially aware and they don't want to feel ashamed or look stupid in front of other people. So they may make things up to cover for something that just happened or something they did because they were being impulsive. See, this is how the brain domains start to overlap. And so they may make something up so that they don't disappoint you, right? They don't disappoint you when they tell you if what actually happened, because again, they weren't able to control their impulsivity. Or they may confabulate. So confabulation is filling in pieces that someone has misunderstood or forgotten. All of us, this happens. The brain automatically fills in blanks with things that we've imagined, things we've heard, or that we've seen on screens. And the brain does that to make sense of the event so that you're able to retell the event in a manner that's comprehensible for the other person. And it happens to everyone. So when we confabulate, what that might look like is an example could be remembering a birthday party from when you're 10 years old, and you remember a blue cake and your favorite uncle being there and a certain gift that you got. And then someone provides a VHS cassette of this 10th birthday party that you haven't seen in years, and you see that the cake wasn't blue, it was a chocolate cake. Your uncle was not at this birthday party, and that's not the year that you got that gift. So it's just over time, your brain may have forgotten little bits of information and so has filled in those missing pieces with other memories, with other things you've heard about to make sense of the event. And the more you tell that event to people, the more you commit to it, the more you'll believe it. You could see that with someone with FASD, with memory impairment, this happens a lot more frequently and with a lot more intensity. So you may have a child telling you, I brush my teeth. And when you go, that night you go check the toothbrush, it's still dry. You know that she did not brush her teeth before going to bed. So you confront her about it and she's very adamant. She starts to cry. She starts to stomp her feet because now the brain is committing to the memory because she's told it over and over and over again. And this is her truth. This is what she believes to be the truth. But what she may actually be remembering is brushing her teeth this morning or maybe brushing her teeth last night. But because of that memory impairment, when she tells you, it's not truthful and it looks like she's lying on purpose, but she's not being deceitful. Confabulation is likely occurring. So reduce opportunities to confabulate. Instead, because again, remember, the more you say a version of events, the more your brain will commit to it. It's a lot like repetition. Those neurons, that memory, those neurons start to connect and they get stronger. So it becomes stronger in your brain. Your brain will commit to a false memory. The more you replay it in your brain, the more you tell other people about it. So you want to reduce those opportunities to confabulate. And one thing you can do is instead of asking if they did something, ask them to show you. You could say things like, show me what you picked up in your room. And just ask what you really need to know. Avoid unnecessary questions, especially if you know your child has difficulty with confabulation. And then in those times where you feel that they might be giving any answer just to cover because they're having some processing happening, or they're not really understanding your question because of processing delay, make sure that when you talk to them and you ask them a question about what happened, give them time to process that question. We know that with our teens, sometimes if they get in trouble, or they come across a police officer and the police officer has a list of questions that they give them, your teen may give a response to a question that that officer asked a few questions ago from earlier in the conversation. And so the officer may not know that. He may think, or she might think, that your child is actually responding to the question just asked. So you could see how, kids with FASD, teens with FASD can get into a lot of trouble, right? Because of that processing delay. Again, stay connected to your child. Do not punish for confabulation or for storytelling. Your child may have short-term memory problems or challenges controlling impulsivity, or see things differently when they're under stress, or maybe they're not able to catch every word someone said to them. So there may be a lot going on when your child is telling you about a past event. And there's lots of opportunity there for them to repeat that past event or tell you about that past event in a way that seems untruthful. Consequences, when we talked about those, how they're not very effective with people with FASD, consequences will not decrease confabulation. It'll only frustrate your child. They'll probably wonder why they're being punished, or they'll think it's very unfair all the time being punished. Focus instead on supporting their challenges with attention, with memory, language, or their impulsivity. Marianne Bukowski is a parent who helped us contribute to this workshop today. And she says, quote unquote, it's important to always stay connected with your child. If your child tells you something that is not true, let it go. If there is a concern around safety, follow up with others that were present. Give your child time. In a day or two, they may provide more information that helps you understand what may have actually happened. By letting your child talk to you without reacting, you let them know that they are safe and can come to you. For the safety of our children, we want them to know that it is safe to share with us and to ask for help and for us to just listen. I found that my son will share things and it helps him process things, and he often comes to very smart conclusions on his own. Okay, so I'll take one question and then we'll go for a 5-minute intermission.
Okay, so there's one question. It says, hello, it's from Elena. Hello, my 15-year-old son is diagnosed with ASD, OCD, stress and anxiety disorders. My question is, will he ever feel not confused to be able to manage his own life independently and feel confident?
So that's there's a lot going on in that question. It sounds like your son will need some kind of lifelong support around things like managing, his upcoming changes, transitions in his life. We'll talk a bit more about a circle of support later on. I would recommend that for your child. But with FASD, we know that these kiddos, these teens, do require support around different areas, different transitions in life. That support may change over time. Your child may become more confident in certain areas and might be able to be a bit more independent in other areas, but they will likely need some kind of support throughout their lives. All of us need support throughout our lives. We all have to work together, and we all rely on one another. And we just want to make sure that your son has someone that they can rely on throughout their lives. And also, he's got a lot of diagnoses there. So just following up and making sure that he's still connected to a lot of professionals for help and support around those diagnoses.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll talk more about a circle of support later if you haven't started doing that already. But it sounds like a really big thing in your son's life, and in probably
Yeah,
all of our kiddos with FASD
it is.
is self-confidence, right? Is to build
That's right.
is to start building some of
That's
their
right.
confidence, because as they become
Exactly.
teenagers,
Yeah.
as they become
This
teenagers,
this mhm. Yes,
they've had a
please.
life yeah, they've had a lifetime of being told what they're not able to do, or being told that this is a problem,
Yeah.
maybe sometimes made to feel that they're the problem. And so it's very important to start focusing on that child or youth strengths and building up that self-confidence, but also letting them know who to go to, and yourself included, when they need help. That help, like that, I think it was a mom told us in the short breakout room, we need to let them know that asking for help is an option, that it's always
That's
an
right.
option, and that everyone needs help. There's no shame in asking for help.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll go. Thank you for your question. We'll go and we'll take a 5 minute break. So we'll meet back. I'm going to start at 5 minutes sharp because we are running a little bit over time. So we'll take a 5 minute break and I'll see you back in 5. Thank you. Okay, so we'll get started in 1 minute. Okay, so I think that was 5 minutes. I didn't time it, I apologize. So let's get started to the second half of our presentation. So the next brain domain that we'll talk about is social skills, and what we also call adaptive skills. So your child or teen may act younger than same age peers, and they maybe sometimes people might accuse them of being annoying, or they may attempt to gain attention inappropriately by invading peers' boundaries. They may be teased or rejected, and they may also be bullied or told by peers to do things that they're not allowed to do. And because they're much younger sometimes than what they are chronologically or look like, they may be very vulnerable to predators posing as quote unquote friends. One thing that you can start doing, especially with our younger kiddos, is to start teaching by practicing scenarios. We know our kiddos, some of them are very good hands-on learners, and they're very good visual learners. So we need to show them what certain situations look like, what certain situations feel like. So things like managing bullies, if you can play act with them, with the family, you could even make it fun, but practice what that looks like walking away from a bully. What does a bully, what kinds of things does a bully say that, let you know that they're bullying you? And then practicing walking away or talking to an adult. What does that look like? What kinds of things could you tell an adult? Playing in a schoolyard near supervisors, right? It doesn't just mean I could see the supervisor across the yard. It means actually playing within close, vicinity of that supervisor, because chances are the bullies, even if they're in that area, they're not bullying in that area. So showing them what that looks like, what that feels like. Showing things, acting out, handling rejection. Your child might go to, show them what it looks like when you go to a circle of kids and you ask to join the activity and they say, no, we've got enough people on our team. How do you react? Show what it looks like to say, no, okay, and then going off to see if there's another circle of peers that they could ask if they could join, right? Instead of the alternative, being frustrated, being angry with the other child for not letting you play, getting aggressive. So practicing what it looks like to just say no calmly and then going to another circle. As well, letting them know other kids can see you, can see how you react in those situations, and they're seeing if you're a good friend, if you're someone that's nice to play with or interact with when you're interacting like that in public. Showing what it's like to handle frustration with peers. What kinds of things could you say? Acting that out. Personal boundaries. Again, what does that look like? I mean, you could tell someone, you don't stand so close to people when you talk to them, but actually showing them what that actually looks like physically to be at arm's length away from someone. Practicing that with them when you're talking to them. Practice things like turn taking, sharing, especially with our younger kiddos. You could have a large piece of paper one day at home where everyone in the family is coloring, drawing on this big piece of paper, making a mural. We're all borrowing from the same jar of markers. Practicing games where there's turn taking, where there's sharing. And then, they might be able to do that with you, but doing that more and more often, so then they're able to start doing it with new people that they like to be friends with. And here we're playing to their strengths. We're involving them as much as possible in the accommodation, in the strategy. Make it fun when we're practicing. Don't lecture. Don't make it seem like you know and they don't know. We're all learning. We're all having fun. Provide opportunities for social interaction. Too often, especially with COVID, it's been very hard. But even, in the past, I'd say decade or 2 decades, more and more kids are not playing on the street with other kids in the neighborhood. They're more doing organized play dates. Well, make sure that those are happening, because social interactions are no longer happening that naturally in our environment. So organizing play dates, maybe seeing if there's social skills groups in your area. Maybe there's recreational clubs or groups that meet on the weekends. There, I would assess and see if you need to advocate for extra supervision, letting them know that there needs to be built-in accommodations for your child. Marianne Bukowski, who's the parent contributor I talked about before, she said something really great, and I want to quote her again. She said, quote unquote, "Start teaching social skills very young. We did this by having play dates at our home every Saturday. We kept them short, a maximum of 2 hours. We had a young babysitter there to help supervise. We also hosted birthday parties at our home from a very young age. This allowed us to get to know the other children and their parents. We were also able to educate parents about our children's FASD and had their contact information if we needed it. Our children made connections with friends, learned sharing, taking turns, etc. They're both boys, they're now almost teenagers, and they do great socially to this day. We still have everyone at our home and supervise from a short distance without them feeling smothered." More and more kids are socializing using the internet, using apps like Discord and Instagram. Make sure that you set up internet use in an open public space in your home. Especially with kids with FASD who may be taken easily advantage of on the internet and maybe sharing inappropriate pictures without knowing what the consequence of that can be, right? Sharing nude pictures of yourself without realizing how that might affect you later on, how that might affect you the very next day. So no internet behind closed doors, no internet use in their bedroom when they're all by themselves. Set up internet in an open public space in your home and let them know about unsafe people. Here we're involving them in the accommodation. Let them know about so-called friends on the internet and how they don't always tell the truth, how there's predators on the internet. And you yourself watch out for online bullying from so-called friends. In terms of school and their social skills at school, talk to your teachers, work with the child's teachers, partner up with them. Find the way to do this that works best for you and the teacher, maybe through a communication log or through emails. When you meet with the teacher or school staff, bring your FASD worker with you or your other support person. They can help with expertise around FASD, some strategies, and also to be there as personal support. Maybe they could even help you take notes. And maintain this communication with school staff often and on a regular basis. What goes on in the classroom away from your eyes can reveal a whole other side of your child that you didn't know about. Maybe they've got strengths that you didn't know about, or maybe there's some challenges there that you need to know about when they're interacting with kids their own age. We had one parent who suggested that her child be paired with an older mentor or a peer who's more mature in the classroom for modeling purposes. And there may be some accommodations as well that are working for you at home, right? Some strategies that work at home that you need to let the teacher know about, because those might help in the classroom as well. They might work in that classroom as well. So it's developing that partnership and working with the teacher on those strategies. Involve your child as well, right? So develop a safety plan with your child for what they can do when they're feeling overwhelmed by peers, by sound, light, movement, the environment. Have a plan B when they go to a birthday party and you know that after 5 minutes they might become overwhelmed. They might become shut down. Maybe have a plan where we stay at the party. If it doesn't work out, then we do something else that's just as fun, but it's no longer the birthday party. Sensory issues can have a huge impact on social skills, and a social environment can be a busy one, and an overloaded brain does not respond in an ideal fashion. So they might, this is an opportunity for them to start misbehaving. This is an opportunity for them to become uh, very anxious, and they might, have a tantrum if they're younger. If they're older, they might be shut down, or they might start yelling or become aggressive. So you want to make sure that you work on a plan together for what to do when they start to have those feelings. Maybe they go into another room for a little while, and they play with their DS or their device for a few minutes before they go back and rejoin the group. Make sure that you keep the plan simple, that it's easy for them to follow. And if you're not going to be at this birthday party, make sure that the adult who's in charge of that social event is also on board with the plan and can also help facilitate the plan if it needs to be, if it needs to get going, if they need to put it in place. And practice the plan with your child. You need to sort of play act it, or let them know what it feels like, what it looks like when the plan is in motion, right? What does it look like when I'm overwhelmed by what's happening, or it's getting too loud and I need to go into another room? Who do I ask? Do I ask, the mom? Do I ask the dad of that house where I can go, where I can be alone for a few minutes? If I don't have my own phone, who do I ask so that I can call my mom or my dad so that they can come and pick me up? And especially with our younger kiddos, think about how old your child acts around kids their own age, and consider this developmental age rather than their real age when you're organizing your own play dates, when you're organizing your own birthday parties, or even family functions like big family reunions where there's going to be lots of people. And remember, when you're organizing play dates with just one other child is often better. And make sure that all social activities are supervised. It helps keep everyone safe, and an adult can provide structured activities for the kids to do together. A lot of time when there isn't a lot of structure, that's when things can start to go off the rails during play dates. And sex education is essential for every child. So you want to make sure that you're informing your child with FASD of sex education, and have as many conversations as needed. It can be uncomfortable for some of us, especially the way we were raised, but we need to make sure that that part of their life, they're also sharing with us so we can help them with that, right? So we can help them also when they're making decisions about that. Let them know that they can ask you anything, anytime. Leave the door open when it comes to sexuality. We don't want them to start doing things that you don't know about. You want to know what they're interested in. You want to know what they're curious about and what they have questions about. You want to be the person that answers those questions. So teach things like the difference between public and private. You can do this in private, but you can't necessarily do this in public, right? Tell them what are those things. Let them know about informed consent regarding sexual behaviors, or how to address sexual desires in an appropriate way. And let them know about online pornography or online distribution of sexual materials. Some of our kids sometimes they may not know the consequences, or they may not be fully aware of what they're doing, and they might send inappropriate pictures of themselves to another person online. And now that picture is now out there, right? So we want to let them know and inform them about what that is, that those sexual materials that do get and how they get spread on the internet. Some sexualized looking behaviors, such as self-stimulation or masturbation in public, may actually be very sensory in nature or soothing when someone is anxious. So be prepared to talk about appropriate ways to meet those needs. and avoid shaming when you're talking about sexuality. If there's any shame involved in when you're talking about sexuality with your child, you're pushing your child away, and your child will get those answers elsewhere. We don't want that. We want to partner up with them when it comes to sexuality. Sexuality is very natural. It occurs to all of us. So we just want to make sure that it's not something that's a problem and that it's just happening to them. And when we're talking about if your child is self-stimulating in public, or there's some masturbation that's happening in public, try and talk to them in a way that they feel safe, and then develop a plan with them. Find a safe, appropriate space that they can build into a habit or routine when they engage in this behavior. And it may take a while for them to start going to private spaces, such as their bedroom, on their own. There's some great websites out there. There's teachingsexualhealth.ca. That's more for parents and caregivers, and their tagline is great: be proactive, be prepared. And then there's this great website, and this is for kids and teens. It's amazing. It's called amaze.org, and there's lots of information there for children who may have questions around sexuality. And their tagline is also great too: more info, less weird. Okay, next we'll talk about affect regulation. It's the last brain domain that we'll talk about today. Affect regulation is really the skill of managing and controlling your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in a way that best helps you navigate the world around you. We also talk about emotional regulation when we talk about affect regulation. And emotional regulation refers to how efficiently and effectively a person deals with a stressor and then recovers. All of us get caught up in a wave of emotions or thoughts or beliefs that lead us to behaviors that don't help us. And our bodies naturally produce bursts of energy to better respond to danger, or what we perceive as danger, what we think is danger, what's called the fight, flight, freeze response. Fight, flight, freeze is your body's natural reaction to danger. It helps you react to perceived threats, what you think is dangerous. So on the news, you might hear someone say, he came at me and I don't know, I just pushed him to the ground. That's fight. Or I didn't have to think, I just jumped out of the way. That's flight. Or I froze and then I knew exactly what to do. That's freeze. Fight, flight, freeze is automatic. You cannot control it. It's a reflex. It's just that some of us over time have become better at judging what really is danger and what is not. Someone with FASD may misconstrue events as serious threats. So you could see how fight, flight, freeze might be happening or occurring more often with someone with FASD. So when your child is upset, fight, flight, freeze is likely occurring. Your child is not being oppositional or disrespecting you. They may feel under attack. They may feel that their safety is threatened. And now they're using everything in their arsenal, like pushing, hitting, swearing, without being able to temper their reaction appropriately. So they look out of control. With FASD, fight, flight, freeze may be more intense. So they need our help to feel safe again. And when we threaten punishment, when they're in this state, it'll increase the level of fight, flight, freeze. They already feel threatened. So now we've added another threat to them being threatened. So it increases the reaction. And during fight, flight, freeze, all of us, our brain gets overtaken, right? So sometimes our decision making actually becomes worse. It's like our brain is short-circuiting. And it's very difficult to process information, especially new information during those times. It's like when your computer freezes because there's too much happening on that computer at once, and all the resources are being sucked up. With FASD, fight, flight, freeze is much harder to manage. And so we know kids and teens and adults with FASD may view events as serious threats to their safety, right? They may misconstrue events as threats, such as someone else getting a compliment. Those little things. And this physiological reflex may be much more intense with FASD. And they may have more reactivity to start with. So what does that mean, having more reactivity to start with? Remember, emotional regulation refers to how efficiently and effectively a person deals with a stressor and then recovers. Here in this diagram, blue represents the level of innate physiological arousal and reactivity, what's already happening in your brain. Person A has a typical level of physiological arousal reactivity, and so a stressor, yellow, can be added to their life and they can manage it. The cup doesn't overflow. Person B has FASD, and their level of physiological arousal may be higher at baseline. They may have more blue in their cup before adding stress because there's a lot going on with someone with FASD in their brain. They're working much harder than everyone else in the room just to keep up with everyone else in the room. So when you add the same amount of stress, yellow, they may overflow and lose control. The issue is that the person with FASD may have more reactivity to start with than others, and therefore may react more to stressors. Your child is not getting upset on purpose. And don't have your child deny their emotions. Everyone has a right to be upset. Being mad at your child or your teen for having the gall to be upset, again, will send them deeper into fight, flight, freeze. It's better to just accept, remain calm, and talk about it later. When they're in this state, don't ask why. The answer will probably be, I don't know, which is probably true. And just because they could get under control yesterday for the same thing does not mean they can get under control today. So what do we do when they're upset? Well, we know that they do not feel safe. So we need to show them that they are safe. We need to tell them that they are safe. Their brain is not able to find safety right now. It's in fight, flight, freeze. So keep talking to a minimum. Talking is just more information, more noise for the brain to process, to work on. And use a calm and neutral tone. So co-regulate. Children often look to the person in charge in a room, even teens, to see how that person is reacting in order to gauge how safe the environment is, right? In order to gauge how this person with authority sees the environment. When we act calm ourselves, when the child is upset, it's just that extra layer of support. If they look to us to see how we're reacting, we're letting them know that we feel safe in this situation. We feel safe in this environment. They may not feel safe themselves, but it's just an extra sort of cue for them to let them know that there is safety. So mirror the emotion that you want to receive back. So stay calm. If you're upset when they're upset, it's making them feel even more threatened. It's making them feel that the environment we're now in is not safe. I don't feel safe, and this person doesn't feel safe. And if we tell them that they're being manipulative when they're upset, when they're in this state, then they won't trust us when we tell them that they are safe. So no threats. Remember, they're already feeling threatened, and things will worsen when you tell them a threat. They'll probably misunderstand your threat and think it's much worse than it really is. And when your child is in this state, teaching is close to futile. So no lecturing during this state. It's not the time. Beforehand or after, you can talk to co-caregivers, other people who help take care of your child, and make sure you're all on the same page of what to do when your child is upset. Here we're advocating. And what we'll do is with the other co-caregivers, maybe it's your sister who helps take care of your child, maybe it's a teacher, we can identify some of the triggers, some of the causes for them being in this state, and then we can work on avoiding some of these situations. Or we can prepare ourselves and change the way we react, right? Because we want to react in a prepared, calm state. So being prepared will give you confidence and calm during meltdowns. And keep this plan updated with the latest information, latest development. If your sister is taking care of your child every day after school, Let her know about what's going on. Let her know the latest developments. Let her know the new thing that now is causing anxiety in your child. And involve your child in this plan whenever possible. This, during the calm times, is when you can practice things like breathing exercise with your child, not when they're upset, but before, right? When you're preparing. So a plan, you can do a plan B for when they feel they're upset. They can maybe do something easier, or you can practice a visual cue ahead of time. When you feel that they're about to become upset, instead of saying, oh, maybe you should try your breathing exercises, instead of using words, maybe use a visual. We know that in this state, words can sometimes be very ineffective, and visuals much more effective. So you may even have a visual that you've created that has different activities that they can do when they're about to become upset. Maybe it's putting on noise canceling headphones. Maybe it's wrapping themselves up in a tight blanket. And then they can either point to it and you facilitate that activity, or they go get it themselves if that's something that they want to do. But still, there's not a lot of language or words being exchanged during those times. And again, practice the plan with them. Let them know what it looks like when you are both calm, right? Maybe you're on a hike one day and you're both enjoying yourself, and then you could kind of bring it up. Oh, I've noticed that when this and this happens, you get upset. Is there anything you think that might help during those times? And then they can let you know. And now you've started this conversation. And then maybe we put the plan in place. And then maybe we start to practice the plan. It could be that during this process, it takes a week or so, they're still getting upset, but we're still working on something, right? That we're going to be using in the future, right? That we're going to start using maybe in 2 weeks, maybe in a week. Another thing that we have to watch out for is when they're excited. That's another big feeling. It's very confusing for parents, especially because sometimes, we may be planning something really special for our child and everyone's excited about this thing that's about to happen. We're going to the ocean. We're going to see the ocean for the first time, and we've planned it, and they're all excited for it to happen. And then 5 minutes before we leave, they have a meltdown. And we think, whoa, I did all this work. I took time off work. This kid's not being appreciative. He's going to choose now to have a meltdown. But what may be happening is the body, again, gives them a burst of energy, all of us, when we're excited, and it can take over brain functioning. And this may look and feel in your body exactly like anxiety. It's almost the same. So you're kind of on edge, even though you're happy, even though you're excited. But it can lead to a person becoming more easily upset. So we have to watch out for when our kids are that excited, especially if we know, they can flip on a dime. You hear people say that often. Well, if we know that they can change very quickly from being excited, happy to being upset, it could be that this is what's happening, and we need to make sure that we're adding that extra level of support around excitement. So if they're jumping up and down in excitement for something, and you know that this is an issue for them, that they could have a meltdown any second now, don't jump up and down with them, right? Don't increase that level of excitement to what it already is. If anything, provide an environment or support that things remain calm, things remain consistent. What do we do when they're on the verge, right? When they're on the edge? So you'll start to recognize the signs or already know the signs of when your child is about to become upset. So if possible, provide these supports. Things like reducing expectations in that moment. In that moment, give them an easier step. Make things easier for them. It may feel like we're giving in, but what we're doing right now is we're meeting the child where they are at in that moment. This is the best they can do right now. This is what they can do. So we're going to meet them there. And also, we're building in self-regulation by exposing them to multiple experiences where situations de-escalated before things got worse. So someone who has never experienced de-escalation, that's calming down before things get worse, does not know what it feels like, does not know what it really is. So if they look like they've had it and act like they're running on empty, then plans may need to change. For example, not going to that last store you were planning to go to. Don't give their brain work to do when they're on the verge like asking them to try new, breathing exercise if this is something that's brand new for them and has been very hard for them. You can talk about breathing exercise at another time. You can practice breathing exercise another time. But if they're not very good at breathing exercises right now, I wouldn't tell them to do that when they're on the verge. And redirect, right? Redirect them maybe to another room, another easier activity. Take them away from what might be causing them stress in that environment. Some great tools to calm down can also be tools that support sensory processing. Like I said those noise canceling headphones, maybe being held tight in a blanket or holding themselves tight in the blanket. Maybe there's a corner of the house that they like to go and just chill. And maybe even providing that as a visual, those different options, different choices on a chart. And then they could sort of, you could kind of remind them instead of using words when they're on the verge, and they could choose what they want to do. You either help facilitate that activity, or if they're able to or they want to, they just facilitate it on their own. I snuck another slide here that I really liked. I read this quote and I thought, wow, this is what I've been trying to say, but I didn't have the words for a long time. And it's, testing is often certainty-seeking behavior. It's from Nathan Orey. And we know that kids sometimes, when there's a new caregiver or there's a new teacher in the classroom, that there's testing behavior. And we think that they're trying to see with this new person what they can get away with. And I always knew this wasn't what was going on, but I didn't really have the words to say it because I was that kid. I was the kid who, when you introduced a new variable in an environment, there would be testing behavior. There would be misbehavior. There would be acting out. Your child in those environments is not seeing what they can get away with. What they're doing is they're testing for safety. They're testing for consistency. And a lot of times, what happens in these situations is that a teacher or a caregiver will then see the testing behavior and make things even more inconsistent by starting to take away things that are scheduled in order to control that behavior. So they might take away things like recess in order to control the testing behavior. But what they've done by taking away a fun scheduled event, if they've now made the environment even more inconsistent. And that will cause even more anxiety. And that will cause even more behavior, or it won't put a stop to the behavior. The behavior won't lessen. I always tell parents, especially I've seen situations where there was a visual schedule that everyone followed in a classroom, and there was different fun activities. And then if the child, before the fun activity, let's say it was math and the fun activity, if the child didn't do well in math, then they didn't get the fun activity. So what they're doing there is they're taking away consistency, they're taking away structure. They're using that scheduled event as a reward, but we know rewards don't necessarily work well with our kiddos with FASD. But what they're really doing that's making even more damage is they're taking away the structure and the consistency in that environment. And so a child or teen will now not trust that environment because even though they say we're doing this, even though we've done it before, they could flip on a dime. They could take away stuff that was there before, that was structured, that was consistent. So instead, when you see testing behavior, show them that no matter what they do, it has no effect on a scheduled event. Show that consistency and certainty in your environment are not flimsy. Your child or teen is more likely to be motivated to enter environments with a consistent schedule made consistent over time, right? With consistent expectations. And that consistency, that structure, happens through natural repetition. Being consistent will decrease anxiety, even when there is initial testing behavior. And I'll take one question because we are running a bit long. So if there's one question there, I'll answer. Any questions that I don't answer today, I will put up my email address in the chat and I will email you back. But I'll take one question now.
Well,
if there's any.
Yeah, there have been a couple of questions in regards to, and statements in regards to internet safety. That's a big concern.
Okay, so read me one of those,
Uh,
please.
hold on, let me go back. Yeah, so hold on for a second. Explore internet, sorry, I'm just, it's hard, more recently sorry. There's so many back and forth. I just need to look at the question. So much peer activity is now virtual and kids are online in games, chat rooms to replace that. How can I get my teen daughter to use better judgment in accepting, seeking all friends? She thinks they are who they say, and I'm paranoid, of course, which is
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes. So again, I don't know how old your daughter is, but with internet use, it needs to be done out in the open. So when she's going on these apps, when she's going on her laptop or however she's accessing those, you need to be there with her. I wouldn't, say she could never go back on because she'll find a way, but let her have an avenue where she can access that stuff in a safe environment that you're overlooking the activity, and then watch out for online bullying, watch out for online predators yourself, right? You're that extra level of support. I know it's going to take up a lot of your day, but this is probably going to be the most important thing you do in your day today, is overlooking your child's internet use, and then seeing when she becomes friends with someone, then that's when you can start talking about, I've noticed signs here that this person may not be very nice, or they may not be who they really are. We have no way of really knowing, but we can start to see those signs, and talking to your child as a partner, right? Not telling them this person's unsafe, but talking to them as a partner and sharing information together so she doesn't keep anything from you about the signs that this person may be an unsafe person. It's a lot of work, but it's so important because so much, like you said, of our child's activity now is on the internet. So we need to support them through that activity. And that's how we're going to support them. We're going to partner up with them so that they don't keep anything away from us, just like sexuality. But at the same time, we're going to try and impart to them some of our wisdom around those signs that people are not who they say they are, and those signs that people are not actually being friends. One great way to do this is, you build that level of trust, you build a relationship with your child, and then one rule you can have, and it's not a rule that's enforced, it's just a rule that you say to them, and it is, when someone talks to you or someone contacts you on the internet that you don't know, please let me know, right? Just in case you're out getting a coffee, or you've turned your back and they've now become friends with someone they don't know. You want to have them tell you, oh, this person just talked to me, can I become friends with them? Or this person just talked to me, I just became friends with them. So now you're keeping your eye on that person. It's a lot of work, I understand, but when we work with families that have teenagers, this is their number one concern, is that information that's being shared on the internet. There's some stuff in the resource list as well, that hopefully you'll be able to find helpful.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, it's certainly, as they age, it gets more and more difficult.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is actually a really great segue to, sorry, Anne, you were saying?
No, it gets more difficult as they age, because they try to, you want to respect their privacy as well. So it's this going back and forth as a parent.
Absolutely. So this segues really well into our next section, which is interdependence. And interdependence is a really important thing. It's a concept that as your child gets older, this needs to be in place for your child and for your family. And the importance of knowing that no one goes through life without the support of other people. No one. No one does this alone. And so we want, a lot of us sometimes put on this brave face to our child that we're doing all this stuff alone. And maybe you are. Maybe you're doing a lot on your own. I'm sure you are. but we don't want them to model that. We want them to know that we all rely on each other so that they will feel comfortable asking for help from the people they have relationships with, right? From their friends, from their family, that they will learn to rely on them, just like we rely on other people as well. So as your child gets older, they will need support in some areas. It could be they need support in things like money management, and with things like maintaining their job, maintaining responsibilities, housing, life transitions, making new friends, right? So think about starting a circle of support for your child or for your youth. A circle of support is a group of people to support your child or your teen during decisions about their life. If possible, put this in place early so it provides you as a caregiver with that extra support, but also in case something ever happens to you as a caregiver. And members should know your child or youth, of course, and care about them, right? It should be people that we're building a relationship with. Family, friends, professionals can be invited to this group. Involve people too that can make things happen, right? That could move things ahead for your child. And some members change. It doesn't always have to be the same people. Over time, strategies change, people change. So some members of the circle of support will change. It's just important to keep adding people, especially for upcoming changes, for upcoming issues, so that it doesn't dwindle down to like one person, right? You're keeping a healthy number, maybe 4 or 5 of people that your child can meet on a regular basis. And your youth should be able to meet with their circle as friends who can help to sort things that may be worrying your youth. Here we're making our child, we're finding ways for them to participate in their own accommodations, in their own support. And this should be a positive experience. This is not a meeting to confront your child about everything they're doing wrong. This is not an intervention. This is a group of people needing to come up with solutions, to come up with ways of support, and to also build self-confidence in your child. So this should be a positive experience so that your youth will be motivated to maintain their participation, because they're going to be the most important member of this group. So we need them to show up every day or every time we meet. Always focus on their strengths. Always keep opening up those big positive areas of their life, because those are the areas we want them to head toward as they get older, not toward those negative spaces, which we're not ignoring. We still address those, but that's not the only area of their life. We need to build up that other area of their life. And build self-image when you're meeting with this person. When you recognize strengths, let them know, label those strengths, help them. And confidence level will be reflected in how your child participates, in your child's effort level. Okay, so again, please email me any questions from today. If I didn't get to those questions, I apologize. There's a lot of material to get through today, but I do want us to have enough time to do the second activity, which I really like. So it's called We Are Detectives Part 2. Again, I'll tell Marianne, our web producer, when we're good to go, and she'll put us into our little virtual groups again, just like last time. In this activity, what we'll do is we'll think back to the earlier scenario of Amy, 8 years old, who apparently is a lot like this little boy that the mom or dad was talking about before, which is great that we were able to capture a child that is going through a lot of what your own children have gone through or maybe going through right now. So think back to that scenario and consider Amy's strengths. Are there things in those bullet points that are actually interests that could be developed into strengths? And could any of these strengths help with some of her challenges? So what is her strengths inventory, right? What's that list of strengths? So talk about that, and then also talk about interests that you feel you could help develop into a strength. And then last, what kind of accommodations have you tried at home with your own children that have worked that might help Amy? Or what kind of accommodations have we heard about today that might help to either improve or prevent some of these challenges? We talked a lot today about different ways that you can help your child. We talked a lot about different accommodations to help support your child. And there are more accommodations found in the resource list that you now have access to. I'll show you the link in a few minutes. It's just important to note that when you're choosing a challenge to work on at home, it's best to prioritize appropriately. So the first thing that you'd probably want to address is things that cause a danger to the individual or to others, like aggression. And the second thing on that priority list should be things that happen very frequently. For us, it's the bedtime routine or the morning routine. And then other challenges can be addressed later. So we did create a resource list for this workshop. It is a booklet that you can download now, maybe with your device. You can either take a screenshot of my screen right now or take a picture with your phone for this link. And this resource list lists different supports and services that might be relevant to your family's life. There's also tip sheets for caregivers. There's information on funded programs, funded services, and there's also information on guides to and education about FASD. We also created an e-learning module called Living Life on the Flip Side, a caregiver's perspective. This will come out in April of 2021. It is to complement the information that we presented today. It provides caregivers with tools to build on their strengths and broaden their knowledge of FASD. And it looks at the day-to-day challenges and triumphs faced by caregivers caring for their children and provides them helpful strategies and resources to help with their journey. When this does become available, please contact your FASD worker, or your FASD worker will reach out to you with that information. Or you can always email me at the email that I'll put in the chat. I'll actually put it in the chat right now so that I don't forget. And you can use this email to ask me questions, especially if your question wasn't answered today. I apologize. It is a pretty busy workshop, so with lots of information, so we're not able to get to everyone. But my email address is eric.marier, M-A-R-I-E-R, @surreyplace.ca. Even if you don't email me today, you can email me next week. It doesn't matter. Just let me know that you're from the workshop and that you have a question, and I will definitely answer you. And if I don't know the answer, if it's something to do with systems or programs or anything like that, I will find out that information for you. Okay. This is a great segue to this next bit of information. If you haven't done so already, connect with the FASD worker in your area. Their contact information can be found by using the FASD Ontario portal, which is part of Health Nexus. If you have a phone, please take a picture of this slide. This is the link to their website. And they have a portal there where you can enter your postal code and it'll let you know what services are available in your area for FASD. And in order to receive the services of an FASD worker, your child or youth only needs to be suspected of FASD. There are FASD family and caregiver support groups. They're very important. It's a great place to find other parents who are going through or who have gone through very similar things that you have gone through. And they can also become partners with you if you need to go to a meeting with school staff or with other organizations. It's great to have someone come with you, and you can sometimes find these individuals in these support groups. Find the closest one to you by using, again, the FASD Ontario portal at this link. Take a picture of it. All these links are found in the resource list as well. And these groups provide an opportunity for mentorship, information sharing, emotional support, and awareness activities. We want to acknowledge that FASD is not an Indigenous issue. It affects all walks of life, all cultures, all communities. We also want to highlight a resource today that some of our contributors put together. It's called the Parenting Indigenous Children with FASD, a Guide to Culture for Non-Indigenous Caregivers. I'll put up the title in a moment, but you want to provide the best parenting for the Indigenous child with FASD you care for. You may wonder about the importance of the child's Indigenous culture and heritage, whether it be Inuit, First Nations, or Métis. Connecting to culture is a source of strength and healing. It supports a sense of self-identity and belonging. It creates well-being, builds self-esteem, and helps children to feel they have a place in the world. It is the right of all children to feel connected to their culture. Ideas to respectfully connect the child to their culture can be found in the resource Parenting Indigenous Children with FASD, a Guide to Culture for Non-Indigenous Caregivers. And again, this resource is found in our resource list. Thank you. We had two amazing parents help us with this workshop today. There was Darlene Duran and Marianne Bukowski. And Marianne says, we know that parenting children with FASD can be rewarding, and our loved ones can live successful, productive lives with support. We really just scratched the surface today. It's hard to do a 2.5-hour workshop with everything about FASD because there's so much, and a lot of it is good. There's a lot of great ideas and a lot of great accommodations out there. So please continue this journey with your FASD worker, with your family support groups, and hopefully you are able to develop some of these accommodations on your own, and accommodations for things we didn't even touch today. We had some partners with our presentation today. The presentation was brought to you by the Coordinated Service Planning Provincial Network. It is a consortium of 28 agencies across Ontario, serving 34 regions, and these are our 28 partners. And a big, big thank you to all the contributors who started meeting with me back in late November, and we rushed to put this together for this project and put it out to you for March. They were super and very accommodating and very rushed, and these are their names. They were the ones who helped in the development of the material for this session. Thank you. And of course, our sponsor, the Ontario Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services. Thank you. Their funding made this workshop possible today. So I will now hand it back over to Meagan for our outro.
Thanks, Eric. That was a wonderful presentation. And everybody, that wraps up today's workshop. Thank you so much for joining us. Your feedback is important to us, and we do want to hear from you about your experience in today's presentation. Very soon, you will receive a brief survey to the email that you used to register for today's event. We'd really love for you to fill it out. And thank you again for joining us. And on behalf of everyone at the Coordinated Service Planning Provincial Network, we wish you a great day.